Chapter 29, Things Happen. In 1985, I was back in the Los Angeles County Jail for an evidentiary hearing relevant to my automatic appeal. It wasn't until I was again sitting in the jail cell on G-Roll that memories of the medical unit's druggings and other dastardly plots resurfaced. I was uncomfortable being back in that predicament beyond my control. At the Torrance Court, where I was held in a glass booth, the guards put the lion snitch, Oglesby, in an adjacent booth. Even though I had never known what Oglesby looked like, I remembered his name from reading my trail. When I overheard a guard say, "George Oglesby is here for the Williams case," fury grew within me. I envisioned myself picking up the non-functional water fountain next to me and hurling it through the big glass window at him. Oglesby must have sensed something, because when I stood up, he immediately started banging on the glass and hollering for the guards to take him out of the booth. That court date was the last time I saw Oglesby. Though I was in the county jail for 2 weeks, it seemed like several months. Periodically, sheriffs would stroll by and gawk at me. The more inquisitive ones stopped and asked, "Are you Big Tookie from death row?" All I could do was ignore them and turn my head. I was more than satisfied when the court hearing was over and I left the county jail. When I arrived back at San Quentin, awaiting me were allegations of extortion, intimidation, and conspiring to commit violence. Of course, it was easy for staff to find some fool who was willing to sell his soul for peanuts. They found an ideal stool pigeon in TJ, the same black inmate Grandpa had properly touched up. As a result of TJ's fears and untruths, I was soon transferred to C-section, where the larger overflow of death row's condemned men were housed. Once I settled in, the first person to reach out to me with the care package, books, food, personal care items, and stationery was Evil, a spearhead of the Raymond Avenue Crips. When I was finally cleared for the grade A yard, I spent time driving iron with Evil while discussing his analysis of the prison politics in C-section. First-hand knowledge of your surroundings can prevent your being triple-crossed or hurt. First-hand knowledge of your surroundings can prevent your being triple-crossed, hurt, or killed. From that moment, Evil and I introduced ourselves. We clicked like biological siblings. He reminded me of my stepsister. At 5 feet 6 inches, dark-complected, with long tresses, his short stature belied his body strength. We shared a common interest in vocabulary development, so we exchanged lists and quizzed each other on enunciation, orthography, semantics, and the correct use of each word in a sentence. Evil introduced me to Black history with a book entitled Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Study of Black history, law, psychology, math, religion, Swahili, spirituality, and other subjects became a staple of our daily discipline in the scheme of survival. I had been in C-section for about 3 weeks when a sergeant was murdered, prompting an immediate lockdown. For more than a month, everybody was subject to disruptive cell searches and occasional harassment by antagonistic guards. Rumor had it that there were so many inmates willing to snitch about the sergeant's murder that staff started to turn snitches away. It's pathetic how some grown men deem themselves to be adults, yet break down like little boys and lie on others. Being an iron driver, I disliked the burpee exercises, military-style calisthenics, and an innovative prison twist consisting of push-ups and kicks. But the atmosphere was so energetic, I got caught up in the exercises. There were Crips all over the place and in the same vicinity. Above me, on the 3rd and 4th tiers, were Tretch and Raymond Avenue Crips. Above me on the 3rd and 4th tiers were Tretch from Raymond Avenue Crips, Bub, and other Crips on grade B. Being on that status, I knew they were limited on food, so when I received my food package, I sent them a pillowcase swollen with food. No guard's assistance was necessary because we used a line to pass the pillowcase up to where they were housed. In C-section, there were 2 yards, one for death row and the other one for ad-sec prisoners, mostly parolees and other doing hard time. On occasion, I was able to Crip reminisce through the fence with younger Hawkeye, Clarence, Hoover, Spud, Tomcat, Rebo, Woodrat, Turtle, and plenty of others from Los Angeles. Seeing so many Crip homeboys brought back memories. It was a reassuring reality to know that if it came to an all-out war against any enemies, The strength in numbers were there. Then again, misery loves company, and I had plenty of it. It was pathetic how many of us Crips were languishing behind bars with no prospect of a future. Back in those days, when death row prisoners were escorted to the yard, the shower, or anywhere inside the unit, they were not handcuffed. One day while heading toward the shower, I stopped off to talk to my homeboy Ghetto. I caught sight of TJ strolling down the tier with the guard several yards behind him. If a camera had been available, the lens would have captured the fury in my stare. The first thing Ghetto said was, "Cuz, it might be a setup." I thought the same thing, seeing TJ walking toward me with one hand thrust inside his prison coat pocket. Several guards approached. I was handcuffed and then escorted to D section, another disciplinary lockup unit for grade B condemned and others. In D section, I was housed next door to Grandpa. He was there for having another run-in with TJ just weeks before I did. On a line, he sent over the violation report that quoted TJ stating, "My life, though insignificant to the world, continued to be plagued by plots and conspiracy theories." I wasn't in D section a week when I received a document dated May 24, 1985, accusing me of a possible escape attempt. The prison handlers and their snitches had concocted yet another implausible story in which I plotted an escape with a man who had been dead years prior. But I'm Tookie, a man who could use a dead man and still be successful. Later, these bogus charges were dropped. This black guy, Sticks, presented himself as an affiable fella, eager to engage in political conversations. On occasion, he'd ask for a book, and I'd send him one to read. Sticks often talked about being proud to be a vegetarian. One day I stopped by Sticks' cell to drop off a book, and he was in the back of the cell, naked, using a slice of bologna and cheese to wipe between his butt cheeks. I quickly turned my head and walked away as he hollered out, "Brother Tookie, let me explain." I shouted back, "To each his own, I'm not tripping." I had ended the conversation, but Sticks continued defending his kinky behavior. He pleaded, "Tookie, I'm not a pervert or a homo. I'm just flashing my buns at you. I wipe my butt with the meat, then give it to my neighbor, who I hate with a passion. Since I can't get my hands on that scumbag's throat, I do the next best thing to retaliate." Sticks carried on his one-sided talk about all the despicable things he did to the food he passed to his greedy neighbor. About a week later, Sticks had the audacity to call over and ask if I wanted some cookies out of his food package. No matter how hungry I was, I remained silent. Minutes later, he asked, "Bro, do you want one of these Gallo dry salamis?" Fed up, I said, "Hell nah, don't ask me again." Sticks' voice quivered. "If that's the way you want it." I was harsh, but better to offend him than eat food sauteed with his feces. Grandpa, my neighbor, was transferred back to C-section, and Evil's close homeboy Tretch moved next door. Immediately, he and I clicked as Evil and I had done. This was the beginning of an inseparable triad of minds. I discovered Tretch also possessed an affinity for study. Our first dialectical exchange, one of many to come, centered on who most deserved a national holiday in his honor, Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X. Tretch defended his position on Malcolm X, and I on King. I didn't know much about either of these black men, but I was less familiar with Malcolm X's history. However, the hours spent defending our philosophical positions were memorable, and we gained new insight and respect for both slain black activists. Tretch asked if I was doing any writing. I said, "Sure, I write missives from time to time." He let out a hearty, deepy laugh and said, "Not that kind of writing, cuz. I'm talking about literary writings, compositions, essays." I told him it never dawned on me to capture my thoughts on paper. Tretch responded, "You know, cuz, a man with your vocabulary should have a collection of essays. One day, your work may prove to be a valuable asset." I didn't envision the possibilities then, but he inspired me to write my first essay, Black Unrest, and plenty of others. I started off with a style of writing intended to impress people with my flair for words, but in time I toned it down, breaking the stereotype of a prisoner being grandiose in his use of language and vocabulary for the sake of appearing intelligent. Studying was becoming a noble reality for me. The prison cage was transformed into a study laboratory, a secluded place of challenge to mold an uneducated mind, a quasi-university where I could increase my familiarity with my culture as well as politics, religion, criminal law, and the world, and get in touch with myself. Seeking to re-educate myself was the first step toward reasoning. Without a conscience, I'd remain an educated fool doomed to repeat his mistakes. I didn't know why I was driven to study. It was beyond anything I could fathom. Was I destined for something outside of cripping? When I wasn't studying or debating with Tretch, we were on the exercise yard 3 days a week, driving iron with huge segments of Crips representing many sets from South Central. The yard was replete with other diehards. Cool Breeze, Crazy Crip, Turtle, Bobcat, Time Bomb, Crusher, TD, and others I can't remember. Being in D section afforded me the opportunity to hear about what was going on with other Crips in San Quentin and throughout the penal system. There were plenty of war stories about Crips. I was told my homeboy Black Johnny had lost his mind. Once the handcuffed black man entered the cell and the door was locked, the ambusher would quickly crawl out and stab him 30 or 40 times. This deadly warfare, a dishonest guard, aiding a non-black prison group, is a reality every black man is aware of. Although there were individuals who survived these attacks, most of them died. I always checked under the bunk before entering my cell to thwart any unwanted guests lying in wait. To hear about these kinds of setups where a Crip, Blood, or another black man was carried out on a gurney, paralyzed, moribund, or dead, was enough to enrage me. There was a time after yard that I returned to the cell and all was clear under the bunk. But while leaning on the bars, talking to Tretch, the cell door swung open. Hurriedly, I closed it and whispered over to Tretch that the door was unlocked. Tretch's immediate response, "Cuz, it's probably a setup, don't come out." When a guard came to the cell, there were 2 gunrail guards slightly off to the side watching. When I told the guard the door was unlocked, he simply smiled, then locked the door. Before leaving, the guard said, "Tookie, you are fortunate you didn't step outside because they were waiting for you." It didn't surprise me. These are subtle moments of humor squeezed in between the prison madness. I knew quite a few Crips who were jokesters, but none as hilarious as TD from the Harlan Crips. He was a maestro of jokes, playing the dozens and always capping. On somebody. TD had a comical and animated flair that either made you want to kill him or laugh. Look a guy straight in the eye and compliment his intellect, while secretly tapping someone else to indicate he's jiving. Or TD would call a homeboy handsome homie, knowing damn well he meant the opposite. I was never the joking type or the laughing type, but TD and Tretch had me rolling with laughter. Unlike Black Johnny, a pressure hold headlock didn't work on TD. He'd just come back for more. He was also good at engaging in private bull sessions. During one such chat, "I need several photos of you as soon as possible." I asked him for what? "Cuz, you're the only celebrity I know," with his insane response. He said, "I can have pictures of you blown up to poster size, then sell them at the Inglewood Forum." I told him that was ridiculous, but he said, "You're the most famous person in prison since George Jackson. I'm going to make some money." I figured TD was joking, but after paroling, that nut actually did sell some posters of me.